Welcome to The Key, where we discuss ways to optimize your vehicle reimbursement program. My name is Lee, and I'm a vehicle reimbursement expert here at Cardata. At The Key, we discuss the strategy behind company car programs, everything between day-to-day operations, spend optimization, and fair market benefits to ensure that you're getting the most out of your car program. That's The Key. Alrighty, so today's episode, we're going to dive into how HR leaders can use vehicle reimbursements, programs, design, creation to really optimize their attractive and fair market benefits in order to keep their mobile teams really motivated. So today, I'm joined by Lindsay Clayborne, the Director of People and Culture at Cardata. Hi, Lindsay, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really excited to have you here today. So let's just start by really learning a little bit about yourself. So tell us about you and a little bit about your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm, like you said, the Director of People and Culture at Cardata, and I've been in HR for coming up on 7 years and seen a lot in that time because I've mostly focused on working for companies that are growing at a fast pace, really getting in at the ground level of the HR and seeing everything being built up from the ground, and that is really what I've been doing at Cardata over the last 3 years, really being able to build programs from the ground up and making sure that as we have scaled through every chapter,
Right.
it's really been like seeing a child grow up and be able to see it go through every single different phase and have to adapt our programs and the way that we do things and as well as our culture throughout that time.
Awesome. So why HR?
That's a really good question, and definitely took a little bit of a windy path to get into HR. And when I was in undergrad, didn't really have a key focus, so ended up with really wonky degree, did psychology, guess I wanted to know about humans, and then environmental science, wanted to know about the environment. And so didn't know how to really merge those worlds together. So took a few years, worked in hospitality, and really loved learning more about the business side of hospitality. And that was really when I was like, I actually really like business. Because before that, I never thought it was something where I wanted to land. And I was like, HR seems like a good blend between psychology, human behavior, and the business world. And went back to school, got my designation, and then knew I wanted to get into tech, and don't regret that decision at all. It comes with a lot of challenges, but there's also an incredible amount of opportunity to be creative, to really impact the business in a positive way, and that's what I love about it. There's never a dull moment.
No, you've got that right. Never a dull moment. I love that. And now, through your journey, you found yourself in vehicle reimbursement, which is quite niche for some. So from your perspective as an HR leader, understanding that our systems and what Cardata does is very impactful for HR leaders, why do you think your involvement in vehicle reimbursement design, creation, and upkeep is so important?
We think HR's involvement in designing any sort of program, benefit, anything that has to touch comp or acts as a perk, we have to be involved because we have the perspective of how it impacts human behavior.
Right.
And more, the demands of HR are how can you get the highest performance and the best behavior from our people so that we can drive the business forward, no pun intended. And so we need to be involved to give that guidance and that advice on how do we structure this in a way that fits for our business, because it's rare that you're going to get any sort of benefit or comp program that's out of the box.
Right.
There really has to be this unique marriage between what you need as a business in terms of your goals, translating that into the behaviors that you need, what are the expectations, and then how do you build a comp or a benefit program around that that's going to get you the behaviors that you want. And throughout all that, it's not just about getting the behaviors you want, it's about also building the culture at the same time, because people don't just stay for the money. They also stay for the culture. They want to be satisfied. They want to be motivated in what they're doing, and they want to know that they're being supported to do that. And so the programs that we build are what are going to be in place to get them feeling that way and building that culture around them.
Absolutely. It's super dynamic, right? There's a lot of things to consider. And, for you and in the world of HR and HR leadership, things are constantly changing. Everybody's always adapting to modern trends. For example, pay transparency is very key right now, right? And HR leaders are also trying to balance really tight budgets in 2024, we all know, with inflation and the finance element, with also, tangentially wanting to keep people really happy and keep people excited to come to work. So as an HR leader today, what are some of your highest priorities for keeping your team excited while also keeping your benefits program optimized?
Like you said, it's dynamic, and it really is an art, because you're trying to balance so many different conflicting priorities, contextual variables, some that are beyond your control, and how do you maintain that adaptability and that flexibility while also keeping people at the forefront. So it's really a balancing act between all of those, and it takes the understanding of what options you have and marrying that with the knowledge that you have of your own internal business. And like you said, everything is constantly changing. I mean, I do a podcast called Transformations, and that's exactly what it's about. It's about adapting to the consistent changes that we're seeing over time, over year in business, and how that's impacting the world of HR. And so what we have to think about when we are looking to balance those tight budgets and making sure that they are fair, that they're transparent. Like you said, pay transparency is huge right now.
Huge.
And it's only in its infancy. Really, it's not like we're gonna roll out and it's gonna be pay transparency and boom, like everyone knows exactly what they're being paid, how it's happening. It's really, the seed is just being planted, and we're seeing like that first little sprout right now. And it's really an opportunity for HR leaders to get in front of that, even if you're in an area or in a location where you don't have the government requirements. There's still so much value in embracing this idea of pay transparency and incorporating it into how you're doing programs and benefits. And so the highest priorities when it comes to how we're building the programs is, first and foremost, just understanding, that the programs that you're building offer real value.
Right.
Offer real value, not just to you as a business, but to your people.
Right.
And that takes being transparent in and educating how they're actually seeing that value. Because there's value sometimes beyond just the dollar amount.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding, how do you translate this thing that you're offering, this program, into a real value, and putting that message forward and in front of your people. So it does definitely take an element of communication and crafting that message. The other thing is how you're determining them. There needs to be transparency in how are you actually determining what someone gets. It's not just the amount that they get, but it's also the decision-making process. There's a real opportunity to either strengthen or erode trust there.
Yeah.
And so leveraging the philosophy of transparency to bring light to how you're determining these benefits is really important. And then optimizing the use of those benefits over time. And that's where data comes in as well, is making sure that you, as the program owner, are understanding how is it actually being used, and you're making sure that if something's being underutilized, how could you better use those dollars in a program that's going to drive not just more value for the business, but more value for people. And then if it's being utilized a lot, how do you either enhance that or continue to offer it in a more seamless fashion? So I'll give you an example. With our benefits program, our health and dental benefits program, we were seeing underutilization of our health spending account. And we think a reason for that is because we were using two different systems. So we took the data from that and we're saying, okay, we want to optimize the use, so we put that under one single program.
Right.
And so the same could go with how you're building your vehicle programs too. You could look at, what is something being underutilized, how could we make that a more seamless process and see if the utilization goes up.
Yeah.
So I think those things are really important, is just leveraging the philosophies of transparency, making sure that you are actually translating your benefit and program into a value beyond just the dollar, and then actually using data to understand are you and your people getting the value from it?
Right. Such an eloquent answer, and I think you hit the nail right on the head with a lot of trends that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes to show that working with a really expert partner in this space, specifically in vehicle reimbursement, can help with that, right? Because we need to make data-driven decisions with regards to market value, because as you mentioned, people need to feel supported. They need to feel like they understand the reasons, as you mentioned, right, behind why HR and finance are making these choices. And then through optimization, as you mentioned, of course, there's a use-based element. Like same in health. If they're not using, how do we better equip them to use or provide something a little bit better? And I think that mentality reigns really true in vehicle reimbursement, especially if you work with a flexible partner who can help you apply those changes and make good choices moving forward for allocation, so to speak, with vehicle programs. So I love that. Really, really reigns true for us. Now, when we talk about mirroring real value, right, like really understanding that the program that you're creating, the benefits program, the vehicle reimbursement program, is providing true value with the market, competitive value as well. Ultimately, there have been a couple changes recently to the cost of living, right? Of course, we all know the cost of living is going up. It's been a huge topic recently. And of course, inflation is high. And while gas prices fluctuate, we have seen an increase in the IRS standard rate, which is typically an indicator of the overall cost of driving across the United States. So that went from 65.5 cents in 2023 to 67 cents in 2024. So as costs change and field team benefits don't pivot to mirror this, what are some of the implications or risks that you could potentially see there for people who might not be looking at their programs all the time?
Yeah, I mean, you highlighted a couple of really important things there. The first is that, we need to be looking at these things all the time, because as part of the role of a strategic HR leader or a strategic HR team, it's to constantly be evaluating and having a pulse on how is this program driving value for the business, and often we're driving that value through the value that it creates for our people. Now, obviously, inflation over the last couple of years has been a hot topic because, it does pose challenges for people. It really does make people stop and consider, the work that they're doing, the programs and the benefits and comp that they're receiving. It really does cause them to pause and think. But at the end of the day, comp is not everything. And so it's important in, again, going back to the transparency, how you're actually doing your program and how you're actually building out your vehicle benefits solutions is just as important. So you mentioned, the IRS looks at their rate every year. And so if you are with a partner that is going to ensure that you're also considering that you're looking at your program on a yearly basis, it holds you accountable to doing that. And people need to know that predictability, especially when it comes to an element of their compensation and of their benefits. They really need to understand that predictability. Again, they're not always going to get exactly what they want, or it's not going to be maybe always what they expected, but you need to still have that predictability, and then you can just be transparent about it.
Right.
Listen, every year on this month, we're going to look at our program, and we're going to reconsider, and you're going to hear from us about what we're doing differently, or what we're going to change, or what improvements are coming.
Right.
And maybe throughout the year, we're going to gather feedback around that. Because the risk if you don't, the first and foremost is that, people are going to leave. You know, people are always evaluating, people work to satisfy a variety of needs. First and foremost is obviously we need a roof over our head, food in our fridge, and we got, water, gas, electricity, but, they also work to, fulfill social needs. They work to fulfill, they want to grow. They want to, build their reputation. They want to build their career. So that's why compensation and benefits isn't the only thing. But, it does matter.
Yeah.
And so we have to recognize that matters. And I think we do a really good job of recognizing what matters and driving that forward with our customers.
Yeah.
But so you run the risk of people leaving, first and foremost. And then even if people aren't leaving, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily engaged and motivated.
Right.
So people may just leave because they don't see any better alternatives. And so looking at your program every year and even and potentially making improvements when it wasn't expected, that's going to motivate people. And knowing that, hey, we're doing the work here to ensure you're getting the most value and we're setting you up for success, ultimately. That's really what people want to hear.
Yeah.
And so we know that, almost half of or employees are almost like half as likely to leave if they perceive that they're being paid below market. So while it is compensation, we want to make sure we're looking at that. We also want to make sure that we're motivating them if they're choosing to stay. So those are the things that we have to be worried about.
Right.
That frustration, those emotions as well. But if we are looking at it, we can get ahead of that. Mm-hmm. And getting ahead of that also builds trust. And that is going to be something that keeps people here. Trust, the value of trust between employees and their employer cannot be understated. We can't quantify it, but it can't be understated and it can't be undervalued.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect segue, the element of trust here, because as you mentioned, right, people need to feel confident in their employer. They need to know that if they looked at the market or they looked at the competitive state of being, right, regardless of what your competitor's vehicle program is, whether they have fleet or they're on favor or they're on taxable allowance, they need to feel confident that their company is doing what's right for them. And so speaking of that, of course, data and service providers like Cardata, we keep up-to-date reimbursement databases, right, to inform rate creation based on vehicle expense data. So the cost of fuel in different areas, right, whether you're in California or in New York, right, the cost of driving is different, including maintenance, including insurance in different areas. So particularly when we're talking about these high mileage drivers, where driving is really key to everyday work, how should managers leverage this data, right, to make good program decisions and try to establish that trust?
It's a really good question. And you highlighted a really good point there. Like, managers should be looking at this data too, because we really should be empowering the frontline leaders to be marrying what they're seeing on the ground with the data that they're seeing from that they're maybe getting from their HR and finance teams, and using that as a way to like bring some light to, okay, how is this translating between what we think it's going to do and what it's actually doing. So we should really be empowering our managers to do that. But more than just the data, I think it's also when you're looking for a partner like Cardata, it's not just about what's the quality of data or what can we get from there. It's really about what is the expertise that they bring.
Right.
How can they educate us? Because at the end of the day, not every business exists to understand, the IRS regulations, to understand favor on a technical level. We enable companies to do that, just like any other vendor that we would look at for HR. We want to lean on them as the subject matter experts. We can, in HR, there's definitely a push to become more data literate, to leverage more of that, to bring insights to recommendations that you're making. Really it's foolish nowadays to come forward with a recommendation and not have the data, because you're going to be pushed back on that.
Right.
Which I think is fantastic. It's really making HR folks think more business-like. And like I said, we should be translating that to our managers, setting that same expectation. But we also need to make sure we're picking the right partners that we can ask great questions to, and they're gonna have really smart answers, so that we can feel confident taking the data and that we have the context to bring forward that, to make any recommended changes, especially if that change is especially if that change requires a lot of change management. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. We can't necessarily quantify the cost of that change management, but it takes a lot of effort, and the managers are going to be on the front lines of that. So while I think it's equally important for the managers to be looking at the data, HR, they should have the same expectation of HR of saying, hey, what value is this going to bring to my team? Like, show me the data there, because we got to help let them buy in at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, that's such a good point. I think it's about establishing real relationships where ultimately there's trust between you and your drivers, and there's trust between you and your partner, that you can say, you know what, I don't have to be a vehicle program expert because I'm an expert on my job, which is, running my company and being an HR leader, where you can say, I'm working with a partner who understands my goals, understands maybe my budget, right? But also can apply my KPIs to how we're managing the program actively. So
exactly, they need to understand your context, and the best partners are going to be the ones that take the time to understand your context.
Right.
Because I've definitely had my fair share where I've, gone out, we're looking to implement a new program, we're looking for a vendor partner to go with, and it can be night and day. Sometimes you get on a call and you have that, that company that just, they want to know who you are.
Yeah.
They want to understand who your employees are, what you're observing, what your goals are. And then you get on other ones where it's like, they just want to pitch you whatever they have. They don't really care what your context is, and I find the best partnerships come from those groups that want to know who your business is and how they can help solve your problems, not assuming that they have all the answers.
Right. And how can we? Because I think it's so important to note that no two companies are the same, right? Like, never are they the same. Never do they have the same goals, the same budget, the same
right.
culture. And so having the ability to understand true authentic value and also the context in which we're working, right? Like really what we're trying to accomplish, I think is so important. And ultimately, when we get into the nitty-gritty of vehicle programs, not everyone is going to be right for every group of driver,
exactly.
right? Because ultimately, some programs are better suited for high mileage drivers. For example, Favor, fixed and variable rate reimbursement, has a base mileage requirement of 5,000 miles.
Right.
Great, that's an indicator, right?
Yeah.
But then, of course, like other companies might need branded vehicles. So, okay, fleet makes more sense. But these are contextual elements that have to be taken into consideration. So it's definitely, really important to note that there is no one-size-fits-all approach.
Correct. And like you said, that reflects back into the KPIs that you're setting. And, understanding the KPIs for one organization and what good looks like is going to be different for another.
Absolutely. And having a good partnership where you both get it, I think is really a good place to start, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So, speaking of, Lindsay, I know that HR operations is an area of passion for you. So how do you recommend that HR leverages business intelligence and data tools such as mileage capture reports, route maps, and spend analysis to stay on top of their vehicle program?
I think we talked about it a bit already, being able to use the data to really inform any changes you're going to make. But taking that even a step further is businesses go through cycles.
Yeah.
You go through annual planning cycles. You go through annual budgeting. You go through annual budget forecasting. You revisit that on like a monthly, quarterly basis. This is the type of having robust data and intelligence on what is actually happening within your program without you having to, be in every single car, or also doing it in a way that's scalable and to a degree automated is really important, because as your business grows, you need that data collection, the business intelligence tools to scale with it. And so having that data allows you to inform when you go into those budget meetings, to be able to say, hey, we're seeing that this group of drivers in this area are exceeding their mileage far beyond, this group in another area of the country. So what do we need to consider there? What's maybe happening? It really acts as a point of asking questions that can then inform the decisions that you're going to make for that next year. So, and then it can also feed into other areas of HR, like what do we need to do for hiring?
Yeah.
Do we need to do, more training on being more efficient on the road? Or do we need to hire more because we see people are not just driving from 9 to 5, they're driving from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Right.
So being able to track and get really nitty gritty on the data helps inform what you're doing in other areas of HR, not just on your benefits program.
Yeah, such a good point. Leveraging this to be able to say, what should we do? Like, what changes should we be making based on the mileage data we're capturing? Do we need to redo territories, right? From an operations perspective, like, are we spread too thin? I think that's perfect. And what you mentioned too about training is also really key, because there are a lot of tools out there, right? If we use Cardata as just an example, right? There's mileage capture tools that also enables people to see pay transparency, because they can estimate what their rate payment is going to look like for the following month, right?
Yeah.
As they capture mileage, they can see their fixed and their variable rate within the app. And so I think pairing that transparency element with really adequate training on how to use tools is that sweet spot where drivers can feel really supported by their company in all assets, or in all facets rather.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, we talked about picking the partner that has the expertise and they really do want to partner with you.
Yeah.
But of course you want to check their technology as well, and make sure that it has the features that you're looking for,
right,
that are going to enable your specific work group, and
right,
make sure that they're going to have what they need, like you said, to feel supported. Going back to why do people leave? One of the reasons is they don't feel like they have the tools. They don't feel like they have the resources. Having a tool that they know how to use, that's very easy to use, is going to make their job a million times easier, and that's what we want at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And regardless of program type, whether they're on favor or allowance or whatever, strong tools are key. Even when we layer things on like compliance regulations, right, which in HR operations and finance operations are key, like making sure everybody's solid and safe. Having tools that are able to do that automatically, very helpful to leverage as well, which is great. Now, we talked about this a little bit, but often vehicle access, so through a company car or payment through a car allowance or a flat car allowance, or any really method of enabling people to use vehicles for work, are often seen as a benefit. And we know that sometimes it can be hard to consider removing a company car because it's seen as a hard asset that is integral to a lot of cultural elements, right? So how do you recommend that HR teams and HR leaders leverage their vehicle program, regardless of type, for talent acquisition and talent retention?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sort of things there. There's if you're considering switching, going from maybe a company car to a reimbursement program. That requires a really robust change management strategy, because whenever you're doing these types of things, you're typically trying to focus both on retention and talent acquisition at the same time. So how you actually manage that change is going to be focused on, or is going to speak to how well you're going to retain people. And so making sure that you aren't overlooking how important that process actually is. And again, leveraging transparency on how you actually roll that out. But as we were just talking about with tools, as a company, that car often does look like a benefit, but it really is a tool at the end of the day. It is something you need to do your job. And we change tools all the time. We change the CRM we're using. We change from one email system to another. And, there's a little bit of pain with that. But at the end of the day, they're both tools that allow us to do their job. And I look at this the same way. A company car is a tool to use your job, to be able to do your job. A vehicle reimbursement program is a tool to do your job. And in both you're feeling supported. It just looks a little bit different. So when it comes to retention, we really need to make sure that it's the change management. Now, when it comes to talent acquisition, it's about being upfront and educating people on, this is what we do, and this is sort of why we do it.
Right.
And giving them that transparency and that clarity on what they can expect coming in. I really believe firmly that you need to give people all the information when they're making the decision to take a job. And they may not like everything, but let them decide that for themselves. But really, the goal, that's going to feed into their satisfaction when they come in. If they knew everything up front, they know how the program operates, at least on a high level, what they can expect and how they're going to get paid, what they need to use in terms of their tools, then they're going to come in and there's going to be no surprises.
Right.
So
absolutely.
That's really important in terms of not just getting them in the door, but then once they're here, keeping them really happy.
Yeah. I love that perspective. And I think, again, it comes to the fact that you don't have to do this alone, right? You're never doing this alone. And at Cardata, we've had a lot of experiences with this change management element where people want to attract new talent by being transparent and putting, their tax-free benefit in their job descriptions and being able to offer new hires, a rate estimate, which we help with, right? But also, we've got groups of customers who needed to make a strategic change from an outdated program to a favorite program, for example, and they're scared. They're nervous about the shift. But ultimately, as you mentioned, I think there's an element of understanding like what is important to drivers, what's important to the company, and from a change management perspective, how do we build a program that's now a reimbursement model? So as you mentioned, shifting tools, or just shifting tools, but how do we build a program that's perceived as perhaps equal value or equitable value rather, where we're saying, okay, we're not taking anything away. Here's a new method of accomplishing what you were looking to accomplish before.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier is there's always going to be changes. And our programs do have to change with whether it's the stage of the business, the stage of growth you're at, the economic conditions, and how in the context that we're actually operating in. Maybe it's just even the services and the products and how you're offering that. So our programs can't remain static, and the tools we use can't remain static. They have to change with us. And there's always a need to be questioning and looking at, like you said, should we be doing this?
Yeah.
Or should we be looking at something different? And we just released an article in HR.com that speaks to this about evolving your benefits and responding to those changing benefits. And I think that just underscores this importance of constantly looking at, are these the right tools for the job? Is this the right way to operate given the context that our business is in? And like we said, making sure we're just upfront about that and we're transparent with our people about that so that they can then choose. Do they want to stay? Do they want to join? And most times it's yes.
Awesome. I love that. Now, the last question of this section, what's your focus as an HR leader in 2024?
Main focus for this year, going back to the looking at HR operations, is how do we make our operations scalable and as transparent as possible, and balancing those two, because we are growing as a business. So many companies are growing despite the challenges that we're seeing. They're growing and they are thriving. They're just having to grow differently. And so part of doing that is also how do we grow and make our operations scalable while also making it transparent. And that's part of growing differently, is making sure that we are questioning the status quo in terms of what we're doing. Just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean we have to continue doing it. Is this going to work when we're double, triple, quadruple the size? What do we need to do now to make sure that when we are double, quadruple the size, that we are going to still be able to operate and maintain the culture? And let's make things as transparent as possible as early as possible.
Love it. Great focus for 2024.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, now we enter the FAQ portion of the key, where we answer common questions from the community. All right, ready, Lindsay?
Yeah.
All right, first, we're going to talk a little bit about cross-functional relationships. So for HR leaders, who are looking to get more involved with vehicle program decisions, perhaps this has happened historically in sales or historically in finance. How do you recommend that they navigate their relationships with field managers and finance, for example?
Yeah, two very important but very different relationships. I'll start with finance, because finance, as well as IT, operations, procurement, all of those teams need to be in lockstep. They really have, at the end of the day, they really have the same goal, which is to enable the rest of the business to do what it needs to do.
Right.
To enable sales to do what it needs to do. To enable marketing to do what they need to do. And so recognizing that you have that unified goal, you'll just contribute in different pieces to that. So being in lockstep, being in alignment, building that relationship early and feeding it often. And then when it comes to managers, I really believe strongly in the philosophy of an embedded HR program. HR shouldn't be in this silo that you just sort of consult when you need something. They should, HR leaders should be sitting in on sales meetings. They should be attending sales kickoffs. They should be going for rides on the road with their drivers to just get to know what is the day in the life of a driver like, what is the day in the life of the manager like. Really understanding that, because it builds the empathy that you need to understand, okay, if I'm recommending how to build this program, I know more about how that's operating. And then when I'm working with that field manager, we're working from the same context. I'm not working from here in the world of HR and you're working from the world of sales. We're working from the world of our company.
Love it. Great perspective. Really solid answer. Okay, next. So, Lindsay, you were recently featured in Authority magazine for Medium, where you shared that "Clear is Kind" by Brene Brown is a quote that deeply resonates with you and your philosophy about HR. How can this apply to reimbursement programs and pay transparency when it comes to vehicle programs in general?
Mm-hmm. I love the phrase "clear is kind," and it transcends everything in the world of HR, people leadership, and I think just companies in general. Whether it's being clear with our employees or clear with our customers, clear with our market, it transcends everything. But specifically when it comes to vehicle reimbursement programs, really what we want to be clear on is what are people getting paid and how are they getting paid? Again, the pay transparency is not just about ensuring that you know what you're going to get paid, but also how was it calculated and when am I going to get it? Answering all of those just very simple questions and making sure that people have access to that information really easily. You shouldn't have to go through 2, 3, 4 people to try to get that answer. Because at the end of the day, we just want people to be able to do the thing that they do best. That's also part of HR's job, is to just make sure that we can take care of the stuff that you don't need to focus on and you can just do your best work. And so I think just being transparent about what are people getting paid, how are they getting paid, what's in it for them, makes it so much smoother and they can just go on doing their job.
Awesome. Great. All right, so last question. In your perspective, what's the difference between equity and equality, and how can we apply that to how we understand flexible benefits and flexible options for drivers on the road?
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite questions, if I'm being totally honest, because the terms often get mixed up so often when we're in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Because we promote equity, we want to ensure, because equity is about fairness, mm-hmm. fairness of process, fairness in determination, fairness in opportunity. Equality is about everyone getting the same thing. Equity is about equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to flexible benefits, flexible reimbursements, what that allows us to do is take into account that we are giving everyone fair opportunity, but that we recognize people are just in different situations. You may have people that live in different areas where the cost of living is different, and you need to be able to have a fair process for determining how they're going to get reimbursed, but at the end of the day, that reimbursement may not be equal, or that benefit may not be equal. And it extends beyond just benefits and vehicle programs, even compensation. You have geo-differentials for how we determine compensation, taking into things consideration like cost of living, cost of labor. And so a vehicle reimbursement program is no different. It's about equity in the process, not necessarily about equal reimbursement.
Absolutely. And that can be directly applied to how, for example, a favor program works, right?
Yeah.
The fixed and the variable element are directly supposed to mirror the cost of driving in a particular area for a particular person, right? Depending on mm-hmm. where they're going, how often they're driving, and also company considerations. So there's a program like that where, people are going to get a little bit different. They're built off, of course, the same general vehicle profile, but the payout is a little different, right? Because it should be based on equity, versus a program that would be equal, like giving everybody, for example, a flat $500 taxable.
Yeah.
But is that really going to cover their costs? Is that really fair for the driver who drives, 2,000 miles versus the one who drives 50,000? And I think that's the really key element here that makes these programs so interesting and so dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely, because it also has to reflect the realities of business, right? People, in some cases, don't just choose to live somewhere because that's where they want to live. They live there and they're employed there, mm-hmm. and that's where they're actually doing their work. And so we have to make sure we're reflecting, again, through an equitable process of determination, we have to reflect those realities in how we're doing reimbursements and the benefits that we're offering.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's been amazing to talk to you about, everything between equity, fairness, and really motivating our team. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's great.
Amazing. Well, this has been The Key. Thanks so much for joining us. Drive safe.